Welcome to day 2 of Breakpoint. Thanks everybody for coming. My name's Dan Albert. I'm Executive Director with the Solana Foundation, and I'm joined by my guests. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Cool. Hi everyone, my name is Michael. I run a validator called Lane on Solana mainnet since Epoch 2.16, which in human time is August 2021. And also run a website called StakeWiz, which you might know.
Hey everyone, my name is Lucas Bruder, co-founder and CEO at Jito Labs. We're pretty involved with the Validator ecosystem, from building Jito Solana, a fork of the Solana Labs Validator client focused on MEV, to running Validators ourselves. So yeah, excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Johnny. I'm from Solana Campus. So I set up a website in September 21, and a month later I started the Validator to do more in the ecosystem.
Awesome. So I think there's a lot of maybe confusion around like what it takes to be a validator, who should run a validator, why. There's a lot of questions around costs and profitability and technical competence. So kind of like dive into some of that, have a just conversation. And I guess just to open it up, wanted to ask like, what drew you to, running infrastructure for the network? What's your story of like how you got started? And why you made the decision to participate in Solana Consensus.
So my background kind of started with Bitcoin mining, actually, back in like 2017. I was like importing these machines from China and like setting them up in a warehouse. And 2017, things got pretty bad with Bitcoin. So kind of got scared away from crypto after that and left the space entirely. But I really always appreciated kind of the technology behind blockchain and how it works with the decentralized kind of infrastructure and how these things all communicate. And that's really the aspect that's always fascinated me the most. So in 2021, when I started to learn more about Solana, and I was kind of looking at like 2 or 3 different blockchains, and Solana is the one that really stuck with me for the tech, but also seeing the community and the core engineering, and like seeing how they just were building this amazing system that spoke to all the aspects that I think a blockchain should have, which is fast, decentralized, low fee. And that's really what like grabbed my attention. So that's how I got into it. But yeah, it's the infrastructure side of things is just fascinating because the actual tech that makes this possible is fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Lucas? How did you get involved?
Yeah, so my co-founder and I started Jito in like mid-2021. Decided to build a Validator client towards the end of that year. And we started working on the Validator client probably like November-ish 2021, and got to made some good engineering progress. And it was like around like March or April, we were like, we don't really even know we know how the Validator works in like the engineering level, but if we're going to be like shipping a Validator client to validators, we actually need to like know what the heck we're doing. So, like from actual to operations, like setting up the vote account and all that stuff, to monitoring, making sure that the validator that we're shipping doesn't have any regressions, that the performance is the same as the Solana Labs validator client. And so we started to run a validator like mid last year. And I guess like for getting into Solana, I think Solana, the tech is very badass. As an engineer, you kind of look to, as someone with a background in like computer engineering, you kind of look for cool things to work on, and Solana was definitely like the coolest blockchain at the time, and that's kind of how I got sucked in.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's similar to Michael, really. I'd been in and out of crypto over the years, dabbled a bit. I tried making a kind of mining app that you could download, but then in 2018, everything got very quiet, so I never launched it. And I hadn't really looked at crypto for a while, and I saw everyone getting excited about Solana. Thought I should check it out, and it was a bit of a revelation because the UX was so smooth. It was the first time I went, well, this could actually appeal to normal people. This has got a lot more potential, whereas before I felt there was a kind of a belief that wasn't necessarily going to be delivered on, because when you have to download all this stuff to your laptop and this sort of thing, it's a real barrier. Mm-hmm. So I've always made websites. It's been what I've done for years. So I threw up a quick little site about guides to Solana, how to get involved, how to stake, and suddenly I was getting 500 people a day. And I went, right, I should try and find something that fits my skills that I can participate in.
Awesome. Yeah, one of the big challenges that a lot of people are talking about, one of the realities of the market is as part of running a validator, there's on-chain costs associated, right? On Solana, consensus votes are on-chain transactions, and as such, there is a transaction fee. We all know transaction fees on Solana are super low, but if you're paying one transaction fee every block, every minute of every hour of every day, it actually adds up to a pretty significant on-chain cost for operators. And so one of the concerns that new operators have or new validators have is how can I earn enough money through staking rewards, through block rewards to overcome this on-chain cost so that I can actually, hopefully make money or have a break-even or sustainable business. So I'm curious Michael, this is something you and I've talked about, what was that experience like for you in trying to attract stake and grow your business from zero?
Yeah, so there's obviously the foundation has a great delegation program that helps new validators, but it has a really long kind of waiting list because there's so many people interested in participating. So it can be very scary to kind of start out without that support initially, because if you're voting on-chain, that's a transaction fee twice a second, so it adds up to 30 SOL per month. So, right now that's over $1,000. That's a lot of money. And a validator, the actual hardware that you need, again, it's hundreds of dollars because Solana is a high-performance network. So from that aspect, it can be quite intimidating to start a validator. But what is also important to note is that there are a lot of sources of stake out there. There's other stake pools, and there's, of course, retail stake. So if you go and you create a brand and you go and market yourself on social media, you create a website, and you go and you look for that stake, you can find it. And there's many, many validators who've shown that over the last few years that have been able to attract a lot of outside stake just through hard grit and hard effort. And to give you a specific example, you're paying 30 SOL per month in voting fees. But when validators are producing blocks, they also earn block rewards. So the reality is that you can break even, at some amount of stake, depending on your commission, anywhere between 40,000 SOL in stake up to 500,000 with 0% commission, which sounds like really a lot. But when you've got a lot of different sources of stake coming together, you can attract that kind of stake within, anywhere under a year, a few months even. So in my specific case, I think it took me about 2 months to reach on-chain break-even. So let's ignore the hardware costs. About 2 months of really working hard and trying to attract stake is when I managed to break even on-chain. And in total, it did cost me 35 SOL by then.
Nice. And you really put yourself out there. I mean, you're very active on Twitter. You're very active helping people on Discord. And I think a lot of people really, saw that. I think, I've heard from a lot of folks, smaller validators, newer validators, how can I convince some random person on the internet to stake their soul with me, right? And so I'm kind of curious, what advice, for any of you, because Johnny, I think you've gone through a similar thing, if someone is, maybe more technical, or they're not they don't have this big kind of more public voice, and the three of you guys are, more known in the community at this point. How does someone kind of get over that hump? What kind of advice would you give?
I think really you have to have a lot of experiments. I think the things that, initially I think stake pools are a great way to kind of bootstrap yourself. You want to have a look at their rules and see how you can kind of optimize towards what they're looking for. And then you've got the baseline that kind of gives you a bit of sustainability while you branch out and get more stakers. But from there, I think you've just got to keep trying different things. One of the reports on my website that brought me my first big chunks of stake, no one used. It was used by 3 people, and one of them happened to have a big wallet and stake with me, and that made everything worthwhile. So you don't necessarily know what's going to work, but I think iterating and trying lots of different things and just trying to be loud and out there and making noise is really helpful.
Yeah, if I can add to that as well. I'm very active on Twitter, for instance, and write informative threads. But that's not the only thing. There's another validator who's been very active in creating kind of guides for other validators on GitHub, on Medium. There's people who write articles just kind of about economics or about the infrastructure behind Solana. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get involved and create content or be active on Reddit. And there's actually like 10, 20 different avenues that you can go to and try to attract stake and just build up your brand.
Yeah. I mean, Lucas, at this point, you guys started running a validator early days, but now Jito is sort of stewarding a whole network of validator operators, right? So like what kind of opportunity are available to folks if they're interested in participating in the Jito network?
Yeah, so for those that don't know, there's a second validator client, we'll call it. It's essentially a fork of the Solana Labs validator client called Jito Solana. And the way it works is essentially you can hook up to what we call our block engine, and that connects you to a network of searchers or high-frequency traders. And those high-frequency traders are sending bundles and trades, and they're willing to pay more for their trades to get into the block. So, if you run the Jito Solana Validator client, you hook into the block engine, you start getting trades that are higher value and has the potential to increase your revenue. So that code is all open source, it's free, permissionless. You just need to be on the leader schedule to get connected. And I think you were one of the first, you were Cogent Crypto, were the first people running it. And yeah, since then it's been pretty crazy. There's 192 validators running the client and roughly 40% of stake.
Are there any particular requirements or additional challenges for someone who wanted to run the Jito validator versus the say vanilla Solana Labs? You mentioned they need to be in the leader schedule, which I think at this day is something like 5,000 SOL staked, maybe a little more, required before that validator would be included in the leader schedule, the block producer schedule. Is there anything else that a validator or a potential validator would need to do in order to sort of get the Jito benefit?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few extra command line arguments they have to add, and the rest of the validator works the same. You just need to download it from source, compile it. There's a few command line arguments. There are a few other services that you can run. Maybe we've been running them a lot, so I think it'd be helpful to get kind of your take on like running the Jito client and what that entails.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It's a fork of the Solana validator, so it's probably like 90% the same. There's the block engine and of course the relayer. So I think that's really something that's going to become more important, is that validators who run Jito Solana over time should really try to run their own relayers as well, because you're giving away the control over your transaction flow if you don't run your own relayer. So the relayer is really what is receiving the transactions initially and then providing them to the block engine to build the bundles. So I think that's really an important aspect. But overall, the technical kind of difficulty level compared to just running a regular validator is pretty much the same.
Got it. And as far as the difficulty level of running a validator, I'm curious, if anybody wants to run a node, you can run we have in the standard Solana binaries, there's a local test binary you can use to kind of spin up your own validator on the local net. You could point a validator at testnet. But when you start running on mainnet, it requires real SOL to vote, you require SOL to stake. So there's a little more buy-in. And following the guides, the official guide, right, docs.solana.com, or I think you've written some validator starting guides, I think you have as well. If you have some basic DevOps experience or some command line comfort, you can walk through this guide, follow the instructions, create your keys, run the process, no problem. But there's so much, there's a lot more to it if there's some abnormal operation or you run into some errors. So I'm curious, what do you think are sort of the best practices or maybe common missteps that newer operators run into when things aren't going 100% exactly as they expected? I don't know, maybe Johnny, we can start with you.
So I think having experience in managing servers is pretty critical. I mean, on the face of it, running it on the command line is not that complicated. You need to get your arguments in place, but that's okay. But it's more about what happens when things go wrong. And you need to be ready to be very reactive to make sure you've got your monitoring, you've got your pages set up, but also that when the alarms go off, you have a clue where to start looking, that you understand what the log messages might mean. And if you've had previous experience with servers, whether it's running websites or anything like that, and not ideally you've had a crisis, but you've been in some sort of high pressure situation, I think it's quite helpful because you have a responsibility to your stakers to make sure that you keep your node live. And once you get more state, you're the significant part of the network, you're slowing down people's transactions by not being present. So there is a real urgency that you're able to react to that. And so, absolutely, you should be working on testnet before you start. You should be getting to know the validator code, but you should also know your way around a shell. You should understand Linux and know how to both optimize but also debug your system.
Yeah, I think all of what he said, and I think a really important thing that we spend a lot of time on is monitoring. So monitoring, as they said earlier, you're spending SOL every time you vote. So you should have monitoring on how much SOL you have left, make sure you have enough SOL in your account to vote, making sure you're close to the tip of the network, that you're not delinquent, making sure the network is making progress in general. Checking your skip rate. Are you missing your time slots and you're not producing blocks? Your voting credits. Are you following the right forks? So it's like this. At the surface, you can get away with pretty simple monitoring, but if you really want to take it to the next level, you really have to dive into how does the network work, and leveraging the RPC API and some other tools available to really dive into how the network works, how does your validator work, how's it performing to others, and both these guys have websites that kind of dive into that, and you can kind of get an idea of what are the different knobs to turn and how is each component of the system doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's what's sort of interesting when running these nodes is you can monitor the local performance, right? How much SOL do I have? How's my memory? Is my disk going to get full? But you mentioned skip rate, which is something almost a contentious topic in the past because your validator is responsible for building a certain amount of blocks based on the stake, but your success in building confirmed blocks is impacted by some of the factors are outside your control as the node operator. And so there is this sort of awareness that I want people to have that yes, you just run this local process, yes, it hooks up to the network, but there are a lot of network effects and things that are happening on the network that you should stay abreast of so that you can say, oh, well, all of a sudden my skip rate is 50%. What happened? I'm missing half my blocks. Is it my fault? What did I do wrong? But maybe that's not always the case, which I know is something you've been talking about. So
yeah,
maybe speak to that.
I was actually going to just say that I think before really launching a mainnet validator, if you just take 3 or 4 hours to read through the docs, read through some of the guides that I've written, some of the other validators have written, understand the metrics and how the network, the infrastructure actually works. So understanding the dynamic of what does voting actually do, how does it impact your credits, how does block production work? When you say a skip rate is 50%, well, 50%, what does that mean? 50% of what? So you really need to understand the source of those numbers. 50% of 4, that's a sample size that's too small to be significant. So understanding that is really helpful to validators and important. And with that as well, understanding the actual validator client, the software. We see, especially recently, there's been a massive uptick of validators that have been struggling with their configurations. And it seems that what they're doing is they're following some sort of setup guide, and they're copying the whole list of arguments for their validator, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's important to actually understand what those arguments are doing. Because they copy these arguments and run their validator, and it seems okay, but then something's not going right. And if you just take the time and you actually understand, okay, this argument does that, this one does this is why I should have that one and not this one. And all of this information is there on the CLI. If you just look at the help output for the validator client, it'll explain it all to you. So I think that's really important. And just investing a few hours to understand that massively upgrades your ability to understand and troubleshoot your validator.
Great. Yeah, and I think one of the things that I'm hopeful that we've really reached a turning point here Solana mainnet recently upgraded to 1.16, which was a significant upgrade. The release had been delayed for a couple quarters for a variety of reasons. So there was sort of a lot of new features and some tech debt that got cleaned up in getting this release out. And now that we're sort of on the other side of that, what the core protocol teams are looking at, Solana Labs and then Jito and soon FireDancer, is like a much cleaner and more predictable release cadence, which means more predictable changes to validator recommended configurations, which means hopefully fewer surprises for the node operators when all of a sudden, we had an issue not too long ago where a lot of validators were hitting out of memory issues because there was a minor performance regression in the release. And if people run into issues, like it's your responsibility as an operator, particularly on a staked validator, you have a responsibility to the network to maintain your operation, to be responsive, to have pager duty set up. If your node crashes in the middle of the night, you should be woken up. But if folks are just kind of running from I just ran the script, but I don't know what it does, right? What we see is hundreds of people land in Discord all asking the same kind of basic question. So maybe, I don't know, either one of you guys, like, what advice would you give to, if someone wants to start out and they're like, hey, I'm new here, right? I'm gonna make mistakes, and that's okay. Like, how would you recommend people go about doing that in a way that's like valuable for them and also like kind of gives them a path to success?
I think one place they can start is using search function because there is such a history of people discovering problems, people solving those problems, and it might not all be in the docs. We haven't got a massive handbook of every log message, but it is in Discord, and the records are there. So just taking a moment to familiarize yourself, or again, with the command line arguments, they've all got a description, but sometimes you might not fully understand that. But you can go do that research, you can dig it out, and you can get a deeper understanding of what you're working with.
Yeah, we also, I would just add, we sort of kicked this off earlier this year, but we do now have an official Solana Stack Exchange. And so a lot of I'll say like the basic questions, the operational things. Hey, how do I ran this command and I got this argument, right? Or I got this error, right? Okay, some of these things happen. We're starting to see these questions and answers populate in Stack Exchange. So please go there, contribute, ask questions. For those of you that are more familiar, please provide answers, upvote good answers. We also have a YouTube series of validator educational videos created by the one and only Tim Garcia, who's here on our team at Foundation. So, we're starting to get kind of more, sort of a little more structured sort of educational flow to what has historically been like a more complex engagement.
What I would just like to add as well to this this topic is that there's nothing wrong with asking a question. Certainly. And there's a really great validator community, especially on Discord, that is happy to provide answers and help. What's important is don't ask the same question twice because you didn't learn the first time. Mm-hmm. If you ask a question, go in there because you're taking up, you're asking someone to help you to dedicate their time to understanding your problem, and use that as a learning experience to then better yourself and really build up your own skill as a node operator. Because we all started out somewhere. It's not possible to understand everything early on. It's a very complex system with a lot of interconnected parts. So absolutely come and ask. Don't be afraid to ask. But at the same time, come in with an open mind and the willingness to put in the effort and understanding the actual underlying issue and learn from it.
All right. Did you have anything there, Lucas?
Yeah, if I was starting a validator right now, I think I would treat it's definitely a business. I don't think you shouldn't go into it and just expect that it's like magically going to work out and that you won't have to put any time or money into it. There's a delegation program that is a good start, and that will kind of give you essentially, I guess it's like a loan or a credit or whatever. How would you say that? Like they delegate stake to you to kind of get you started and starting to run testnet validator and start to you can set up. There's something called Watchtower that's like a really good starting point for monitoring your node. Figure out what Watchtower that stuff. And I think one thing that like both of these guys have done really well is like building tools for the ecosystem. And between these two, validators.app and StakeView, and there's a few others, I think those are really good ways to, you're kind of becoming like a thought leader in the Solana ecosystem. And these guys put out Twitter threads all the time that get picked up a lot, and that goes a long way. If someone's going to stake Sol for the first time, they're going to go, and it's kind of like advertising in a way. So I think like building dashboards, trying to potentially gamify it and become a thought leader, I think that's like pretty important for like being successful as a validator.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we can talk about stake pools for just a minute. There's a number of pools on Solana that delegate to lots of different validators. The foundation also maintains its own delegation strategy, and all these pools have sort of different algorithms or different criteria for distributing the stake deposited into the pool or held in the treasury to many different validators. Johnny, on Solana Compass, you have a nice page that sort of gives a summary of all the different stake pools, the returns that they provide to the stake pool depositors, but also a list of all the different validators that each stake pool makes delegations to. Lucas Gito runs Gito Sol, which is your own stake pool. One sort of potential, I'll say, path to victory in at least sort of the delegation world is as these stake pools grow and have more well-defined or sort of deterministic staking criteria, a new validator would hopefully be able to spin up and know, okay, if I run Gito and I do this, maybe I'll be able to get a deposit from Gito's pool or Marinade or JPool if I have these kind of metrics or this kind of performance, or my validator is in this particular location. So I'm kind of curious for your take on how validators might engage with stake pools, or how they might find success or challenges sort of in the liquid staking landscape.
So, I mean, my background is SEO, and I look at ranking factors. And so what's important to this pool, what are they looking for, what do they want to reward? And the good thing about that is that most of the pools are looking to improve the ecosystem. So if you're a good match for the pool, you're probably a good match for Solana in general. So look at the rules, see how you can fit into them. Where are you going to host? What kind of machine do you need? Are you going to be able to be at the top of the vote credit list? Are you going to be fast enough? It's mapped out for you. There's a path to stake there. You just have to go and read the instructions, basically, and fit into that.
I think what he said definitely makes sense. I think it's pretty cool. There's, it's pretty, there's no like custom stake pool programs or anything you have to write. Anyone can spin one up. And I think it's pretty cool that every stake pool has different delegation criteria. And I would definitely if you are a validator, those stake pools can be pretty valuable for helping you get bootstrapped. I think Gito Sol right now, I think there's going to be 100 validators in that pool pretty soon. Roughly 50K of Sol per validator right now. So that's, just over $1.5 million of Sol. That's a pretty good starting point for running a validator, especially if you have some Sol from the delegation program or are able to attract Sol staked from retail and whatnot. So I think stake pools can definitely help get you started and kind of accelerate that path to profitability.
Yeah, if I can just add to that as well, like Lucas said, we have very little time left. Running a validator is a business. It's delegated proof of stake, right? So delegators are your customers. So stake pools are your customers just as much as individual delegators. So really investing an extra $100 or $200 in a server that performs better, that gives you a better ranking in the performance ratings that stake pools use, adds a lot of value because it will translate to more stake that you get, especially from the algorithmic stake pools like Marinade.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much. And if I'll just make one more quick plug, because I made this announcement yesterday, but since we're talking about it, why haven't you run your FireDancer testnet node yet?
I don't run a testnet node.
All right.
That's why.
Okay.
The packed schedule.
I'll run it on mainnet.
All right. Yeah. Nothing but prod, huh? Cool. All right. Well, we are at time. Thank you all very much. Thanks everybody for coming. Really appreciate you. And happy Breakpoint.
Thanks, Dan.
Cool.